people in the room, and I assume it's a chance of morality or so anyway, I was thinking about that, and we hear a lot about what the candidates say, and one of the things that seems to come out kind of over and over again is that they all stand for change, for change. And I'm looking out over the MUZ community and all of us involved in what we've been doing over the years. I think we got a much better slogan. We're standing up for evolutionary change. And if you think about that, all that we do is research and education. We're standing up for the protection not only of biodiversity, but the processes which leads to that. I've watched a lot of debates. I haven't seen a single question about this, even about conservation. So, and it seems like good slogans. I figure I'm thinking that maybe one of us needs to run president. But I would really like to thank Craig for inviting me, and for Allison, and whoever worked on this and putting this together. It's really been smashing. It is personally a high school reunion that I never had. So that's, but when I got the invitation, I immediately said yes. I mean, with a split second, because, and the main reason is because I really want to take this opportunity to come here and thank this institution, the University of Raleigh, for my foundation, and not just my career, but my life. And so if I do nothing more than talk, let's say thank you. And it's not an institution, it's people. Many of them were with me, I don't want to say how many years ago, a long time ago. So that's really nice. Now I understand there's some conflict. I think that probably I've had a fairly diverse career in many different things. And I'm reasonably sure that the Museum of Bird Zoology would not want to take credit for like everything I've done. So I'll allow for that. I'd also like to say that I was here for 8 years, and I never learned to put up a decent study scheme. Actually, that's not true. I actually just had a different kind of philosophy style. I went more for the freestyle, interpretive study scheme. While we're on confessions, I sometimes don't take my field notes for big. And I say this because maybe other people will come forward with, deal with this themselves. Actually, if the truth was known, sometimes I take my field notes on the back of envelopes. But still, the lessons of MUZ have, in every other way, I've been a good MUZ student. So, thinking about politics and the speeches and all that kind of thing, and given an opportunity to give a speech, it seems to me it's a season where everybody is talking about their early struggles, their early, trials, tribulations, and their sacrifices. And that's what you have to talk about. So I want to give you a minute about my sacrifice. I've always been interested in birds. I've always thought I'd end up being where I am today. I'm an ornithologist and incredibly unpaid for it. But when I went to apply for college, I thought, well, being interested in natural history and nature, I should go to nature. And so I went to UC Santa Cruz. And I was there in UC Santa Cruz for a couple of years. And it occurred to me after a couple of years at UC Santa Cruz, I don't know when this epiphany came. I think I might have been in the lowest position in the geodesic dome, I'm not sure. But it occurred to me that I heard of the citadel of the people up across in the Bay Area in Berkeley who were devoted to the study of natural history in a very serious way. And I knew that I had to make a big decision. And I looked around and I said, can I give up the body surfing, and can I give up the meditation and residence? And I really made a sense. That's it. I know that's not going to get me elected. So actually, okay, then I came up here and I had to work in a coal mine. Jim and Ned, and Eric, and Frank, and I don't know what I'm leaving out here, but for all the students, is just irreplaceable. And so it's really worth it. And I'm not going to go into all the lessons that I learned. Some of them were learned, I think the students will attest to this, and I learn quickly and sometimes a little harshly. For example, I was capped by Franklin Delta to go up to work on the Shorebird project, a great honor, and I was eager to please. So the first day out on the tundra, I found a pectoral sandpiper. It's very difficult sandpiper to find. And every evening at the field station, the graduate students, people who were far over my head, would gather for a cocktail hour to discuss the day's events out in the tundra. And well, I came in and I reported that I found this pectoral sandpiper, and Frank said to me, peering over his spectacle, how many eggs were there? And I said, well, 4. And he must have detected a young person with a slight quaver in his voice, because he said, are you sure? And I said, 4 or 3. I think 4. And he peered over his spectacles and said, I don't want you ever to come in here without an accurate count of anything. So, the lesson I learned from this was I said I would never study shorebird. Some of the lessons are rapid and harsh, and some of them take a long time, and I'll have to admit, this is for Franklin Delta students here, it's only been about the last 2 weeks that I've learned to appreciate opera, and it was calming. But I'm working up to very, I'll get this. So I'd like to start my talk, and what I'm going to do today is the theme of what I'm talking about. I've done a lot of different things, and so I want to talk about one thing. And I picked something that I thought sort of was one of those lessons, those core lessons deep in the onion. I guess we're using them. I don't even like onions that much, but the deep in the onion I got from the MDT, which is that you learn from the particular. You learn the details of your species, you learn the details of your system. And it's from that bedrock of understanding and attention to detail that you can start to make the big leaps and look at the bigger world. But it is important to ask important questions as well as attend to the nouns of history. This is supposed to turn on. Okay, good. All right, so I don't know if I'll get too left of the part, just to get you in the room a little bit. So, what I'm going to be talking about is really shows my deep connections to a couple of great institutions. Believe it or not, the MDZ isn't the only great institution, but it is great. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to work, to be a student at one and work for another. And the issue I'm going to be talking about is adaptations of vertebrates in general, and sparrows in particular, to the tidal marsh environment. And this is actually an issue for which MDZ and the Smithsonian have a rich history. So it makes sense. I don't know the mode of evolution this is, I'm not sure who does that, but I am some sort of hybrid or something. But Spencer Baird was the second secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, and he actually founded the scientific collections of the railroad car full of random specimens hauled into Washington today. And I don't know who Joe Grinnell was, but anyway, they're both founders of these, one founders of these great institutions. And that is not really the most significant part of their career, the founding of the institutions and all the stuff we heard today about the science and everything. So really the high point of their career is that they each described a new subspecies of song sparrow. So Spencer Baird described the Alameda song sparrow, which is a race that lived out in the desert, in Searsburg, in 1858, I believe. So a long time ago. We at the Smithsonian have about 65 years of you guys. we can do these sorts of things. Joe Grinnell, about 60 years later, described the last of the three subspecies of song sparrow in San Francisco Bay, the sassoon song sparrow, which is the most wildly differentiated. See that? That's pretty crazy. Song sparrow in the group. And I didn't actually describe anything, but I've been working on the salt marsh, much more recent, in 1951, described subspecies of swamp sparrow, a bird in the same genus, Melospiza, in the Delaware Bay. So San Francisco Bay, Delaware Bay, Melospiza, salt marsh. It just all seemed very cosmic to me. It just seemed like something I needed to talk about. So I'm going to do what I said I was going to do, is I'm going to start with the small thing, the focus, the obsession on the details of this one particular taxa, the coastal plain swamp sparrow, the salt marsh subspecies.
Can you hear myself out the back?
No. Yeah, I'll just be sitting there not hearing anything. Okay, and then I'm going to get to the bigger picture of what this kind of led me to in terms of the implications for the larger world. So this is the attention to detail of natural history. The bird I work on is the swamp sparrow. I come from the institution, I was Smithsonian, but I'm actually at the National Zoo. The currency at the National Zoo is that they refer to the interesting animals that we work in general in the National Zoo as the charismatic megafauna, the charismatic. And so I'm really into like that whole concept that we should be rebuilding things on large charismatic species but they're thinking about pandas and elephants. And I'm thinking about swamp sparrows. And to me, it's just me, it's really the most beautiful bird. I mean, Frank Tuttle would look at the handers in the drawer and said, this is a bird with character. And just from a design point of view, it's a bird with bird shapes. Which I find very nice. I think that's in this year. And, very nice. But I don't convince the people to do that very often about that. I'm hoping that you guys are more sympathetic. I was going to tell you about the natural history, but it's actually a pretty boring bird and I don't have that much time. So let's get to the interesting thing. The swamp sparrows live in the boreal forests and wetlands in eastern North America mostly. It's pretty coincident with the glacial line, so they're probably very rare during the time of glaciation, and they expanded rapidly and into the wetlands that were formed by the retreating glaciers. And we're trying to come up with a world estimate, kind of a systematic GIS estimate for bird survey. And so far, our best estimate is that in the world there are a ton of swamp sparrows. In this area here, there is a small population, and we can get that a little closer. And down here, we're sitting in on this. It's mostly isolated. It comes together in northern New Jersey. If I really was paying attention to the intergrade zone and the hybrid zone, we of course need to do field work on the meadowlands, and I'm afraid of finding Jimmy Hoffa. So I haven't really worked with him. The inland freshwater, the coastal freshwater. Now, I owe a lot of my intellectual approach to science and to the Berkeley style, the MVZ style. But I have to say that it predates that, really, in the history of ornithology. And the two things I come away with in terms of the style of research that I got out of this, maybe I missed something, is attention to detail in natural history. And the second thing is a firm respect for the culinary arts. That's one of most of you live in Berkeley, right? So, John James Audubon wrote about the swamp sparrow and painted it, and he shows both of the aspects of this. First, we have the really nice description. Could have been, I don't know, any, not the 107 or whatever, TAs. I know how you grade this, but it's reasonably good. But the second part is more interesting. Their flesh is said, which perhaps forms no objection to some people against its use. They become fatter and tender when the weeds have produced an abundance of seeds. I mean, I don't think Frank Gonzalez could have said that better. His competitor, Alexander Wilson, not to have done painted the swamps where they both had their own quote-unquote type specimens that they kept for themselves, and they both painted their own portfolio of birds. And interesting enough, his bird was a coastal plain swamp sparrow, collected right outside of Philadelphia. But he had no clue that it was a coastal plain swamp sparrow. It was 150 years before the subspecies was described. And I have no idea because this thing looks nothing like a swamp sparrow. So I don't know why he didn't think that it was something kind of weird and different, because it's like, it's in no way a swamp sparrow. Now, I am kind of obsessed with the coastal plain swamp sparrow. Some people think, like particularly my wife and kids. So I'm going to, I think I kind of assume everybody knows everything about this bird. But for those of you who do, have some patience. But I'm going to give you some little priming of this bird. That's what's interesting. What is going to be interesting to know. First collected 1804 by Wilson. First described in 1951. 4 years after the bird was collected in the eastern shore of Maryland. And people in these poor people, I guess they were really hot. They were incredibly shocked and awed by seeing this swamp sparrow in such a different habitat of brackish salt marsh and so far away from the nearest swamp sparrow. Well, it lives in middle Atlantic brackish marsh, we know. It's actually quite widely distributed, but we have a better idea of how many there are than the regular swamp sparrows. We think there are about 25,000, so that's not a whole lot. They are quite distinct in terms of traditional morphological movements. They have a large bill. Overall, the rust coloration is more grayish. They have more black in the plumage, and any two of those three combinations can be put in discriminant function, and you can identify 99% of the specimens. So it almost can be considered like a phylogenetic species or whatever it is. It's quite non-overlapping. And this is the example of kind of data we have. You can see estimated bill volume of the black dots. It's supposed to find swamp sparrow, much larger than all the two other continental subspecies. No difference in size as indicated by tarsus length or anything else we've looked at. The bird is a swamp sparrow with a big nozzle and a big bill. And that's also characteristic of the birds of swamp sparrows here. Matter of fact, I want to say something about that because it's sort of fitting here to talk about this convergence between Joe Grinnell's bird and the bird on the East Coast. This is the Sassoon-based song sparrow. This is the coastal plain swamp sparrow. This is a regular old ordinary Berkeley Hills song sparrow. This is a regular old ordinary swamp sparrow. And it might not jump out of the page at you, but if you really study it, you can see that these birds have a more robust bill, both of them, and they both share much more black in the plumage compared to these birds, particularly around the face and head and crown stripes, and they both share the tendency towards graying of the rusty areas in the plumage. So it's kind of a little mini convergence between the Sassoon Bay and Delaware Bay, and I was happy because it seemed to me a golden opportunity to take a lot more trips to Berkeley every year. So the big picture. I lost track. So the big picture is tidal marsh. I'm looking at these words, tidal marshes. I see they're differentiated. How does this fit into the whole picture of organisms that live in tidal marshes? So the first thing is to get the bigger picture of tidal marshes themselves. Tidal marshes are a habitat that I consider to be everywhere and yet nowhere, in the sense that they are common along a lot of the coastlines, mid-latitude coastlines where it's protected, turn into mangroves when it gets tropical. But the fact is, if you add up all of the salt marsh in the world right now, there's only 60,000 square kilometers. Over half of it is in North America. So the big areas of salt marsh in eastern North America, the Gulf Coast and San Francisco Bay, we have on this continent the world capital of salt marsh. And the fact is, I assume there are no tidal marsh ecologists around here to wince at this, but once you've seen one tidal marsh, you've kind of seen them all. They're very similar. And that's a good thing because you can make some nice comparative studies. Generally, they're tidal, and they have one species of dominant plant, or maybe two species of dominant plant. A little bit, possibly zonation between the below mean high tide and above mean high tide, but a pretty simple system worldwide. And so what we did is we wanted to know what is the distribution of endemic packs, things like the coastal plain swamp sparrows that are locally adapted or the song sparrows, these tidal marshes. So I've exhausted, I've done this for birds, mammals, and reptiles. I'll show you for exhausted going through the literature. We can talk about artifact and what, how people describe these things, but my conclusion really is at this point that so far seems to be a mostly North American phenomenon. Not too many of them. This is breeding birds. Proportion of species that are endemic is pretty small. Proportion of species that have at least one endemic subspecies, the tidal marshes, is pretty big. Then there are birds that haven't been described that have locally are restricted to tidal marshes in a large portion of their range. So that's a fair degree of sort of ecological and morphological specialization on this habitat compared to areas that show none. So there's something going on in North America. I don't know what it is, but I'll keep it going for a while trying to figure out what it is. Most of these subspecies are very weak in terms of fitting on neutral or so-called neutral genetic markers like DNA or microsatellites that show FSP values lots of zeros on the decimal point that show very little linear sorting of mitochondrial DNA. And the general conclusion is that these things are morphologically distinct, but genetically they're not at all distinct. And that's true of these song sparrows out there. But what does that say? Luckily, there's a kind of a debate in the whole literature about what subspecies mean in terms of genetic convergence. Should we be defining them more on genetic markers, not morphological markers? But I'd say, in this case, we would have lost a really big story if the subspecies had been described in a modern way with strictly DNA sequencing and that kind of thing. Because, in fact, we have first of all, fairly common migratory birds that show a fair amount of morphological differentiation without underlying genetic differentiation and DNA markers. But in this case, we have a lot of birds that are showing this distinction. Clearly, there's something going on, and partly it's because I'll get to it in a minute, the reasons I'll get to it in a minute. And it's a phenomenon I think that we need to recognize because we may be catching some evolutionary processes very early as a response to this. The challenges that these birds have to be solved is really what these things are really one of the best examples from birds on ecological risk because in a very short states you have a very sharp environmental gradient and these birds are responding in a very sharp and localized fashion with some pretty distinct differences. So some of the things are salinity, tidal cycles, seasonal and unpredictable flooding, a unique combination of marine and non-marine food resources, and yet a high primary productivity that could attract a lot of birds in terms of resources, but on the other hand, a fairly harsh physical environment that they have to get over in order to adapt to these things. Simplicity. The things that count against this is going to have habitat, lack of isolation, but also historical instability. These things, I won't spend too much time on this, it's just showing you that as the glaciers receded, it took a while for the shorelines to estuaries to flood and that kind of thing. Many of these tidal marshes formations like Chesapeake and San Francisco Bay are only 5,000 to 7,000 years old probably. So it's a very recent moving target, very distinct, and that could act against differentiation. I'll go through this quickly. There's some salt marsh savanna sparrows. There's a salt marsh east in the east. We have the seaside and salt marsh sharp-billed sparrow with its relative the lacan sparrow. There's my favorite, the swamp sparrow, and they are giant. And the king and paparale, and I thought that you might be here, so I did have to slip in homage to the salt marsh mammals, the salt marsh harvest mouse and the western harvest mouse. But most of these birds are, the biggest group of radiation, if you want to use that generous term, are sparrows. We have the song sparrows, we have the savanna sparrows, and we have in the sharp swamp sparrow. And every part of the coastline has 1, 2, or 3 species of dominant sparrow, and they really are the dominant pasture in the system. And are very generalist, take advantage of this productivity, build up enormous populations like that. So what are the differences? Basically the descriptive thing is, let's start looking at some of the differences and see, I've seen the differences in the coastal plain and song sparrow and how they compare to all of these birds that have a result of repeated colonization of this very distinct habitat over a fairly short period of time. So clutch size is consistently smaller than the tidal marsh birds. These are all really significant individual pairwise comparisons. Nest success is also much lower, and it's been driven by very high rates of predation in salt marshes. So that's kind of interesting. I can't get into the theory of clutch size and hypotheses, but one theory that's still very vibrant is that high nest predation selects for smaller clutch sizes. And it sort of suggests that maybe these birds that are in a high predator environment that might account for their about 1 egg, half of 1 egg smaller clutch sizes. And in fact, an intriguing relationship here is that even though you see the standard relationship of bigger clutch size with increasing latitude, a much better relationship is found when you direct, and this is 15 studies, lots of people gave me kind of a sort of a meta-analysis. If you look at the direct measure of predation rates on nests, it actually gives for ecological data a reasonably good description of variation in clutch size. I don't know if there's a comparable comparative study with the North American birds. It's sort of intriguing and something to pursue. Then there's the bigger bill, the coastal plain swan sparrow, is part of a line. Allometric line shows that for a given body size, tidal marsh birds tend to have much bigger bills, and the increase in bill size is much faster than a selection of all the genera of other sparrows in the world. So there's something going on with bill size. It isn't just the coastal plain swan sparrow. Their clutch size is generalizable to the bird. The bill size, bill slenderness, they can have a more bigger bill that's more slender, maybe good for invertebrates foraging. And then there's this kind of small extension of the Glover's rule, the ecogeographic rule that has been coined. I don't know if it's Grinnell or somebody after this. Grinnell's the first one to notice this actually. It's called salt marsh element. And it's a tendency for salt marsh organisms to be either grayer or black. Now I've just shown the birds, it applies to snakes, it applies to small animals, that there's a tendency for every case where there's color difference, it's always in the direction of gray or black, and it's very consistent. And this is about as close as I'm going to get to the black lagoon thing. Probably stop. So this is the ultimate creature of the black lagoon, the ultimate phenotype of the tidal marsh bird, and I don't know if anybody knows what this is. Shout it out in flight, or I can tell you it was just ET size. And this ultimate tidal marsh bird, the one that we all need to pay homage to, that I convinced you how interesting this whole system is. This is it. This is the epitome. So that's why we need to advocate for evolutionary change and biodiversity. All right, I have about 30 seconds to convince you that the other alternative is, this is a fairly good case where there being kind of adaptive syndrome, which is unrelated or some usually unrelated colonizations of sparrows in this environment. The other question is, do we know, since we can't find any genetic differences in the DNA and the microsatellites or the mitochondrial DNA, do we know that any of this is genetically based? We've attempted to get this a little bit by doing a common garden experiment, picking up botanist, hand raising a mess of sparrows, and as young as we could take them, exposing them to similar environments to each other, different from the environment that they would have been raised in the wild. And we found that the body size difference is not there because we didn't find a big body size difference in the birds in the wild. But the bill size difference is quite substantially different between the captive raising presents in Georgiana, and very similar to the wild caught birds. And the color difference is the amount of black done by digitizing the plumage is substantially different and very similar to what we found in the wild caught birds. So we haven't traced it back entirely, eliminated any environmental or maternal effects. So we've gotten fairly close to showing that there's a fairly good likelihood that these adaptive traits, the ones that are seen, some birds as they hop around in the mud, are exposing to the environment, given the fact that there's very recent colonization, probably gene flow, it suggests to me that it's fairly intense selection in this gradient. And that's why we're seeing repeatedly over and over again these differentiation. So when I was a graduate student, you were warned against just thinking of sweeping adaptive explanation for everything. I think this is one of the times that was getting to be kind of an idea, a new idea. And but I guess I didn't learn my lesson. And so I believed in the arguments that the Pangloss, this is the best of all possible worlds for tidal marsh sparrows. And so tidal marsh sparrows show a series of adaptations in the face of all this gene flow and everything that they still, and I didn't talk about this, but there's really good physiological work on the renal adaptations to salinity, consistent across all the ones that have been studied. They have longer bills and bigger bills, presumably to feed on animal prey throughout the year because the seed supply is not there. That's my hypothesis, but we're working to test that. Tidal marsh sparrows are grayer and blacker to blend in with the black lagoon, mucky, disgusting, smelly anaerobic muds that you find these birds working on, because anaerobic muds, iron salt, tend to produce iron sulfides and iron oxide, and actually did a fairly good established physiochemical explanation for why the substrate is different, and they probably are just background matching. But I've been working with Jed Burt at Ohio Wesleyan, and we've shown that they have incredible levels of better bacteria, and that the melon may be protecting against that, and that makes my scalp itch every time I think about it, better than these bacteria. And these, along with some life history traits like the sledge size, survivorship, and dispersal, may form a suite of adaptations to tidal marsh life. Bear with me for 10 seconds. This is with the conservation message, because I'm the first talk in the conservation session. This incredible system of local adaptations, not just in sparrows, but other tidal marsh vertebrates in North America, is under incredible threat. Not only that, tidal marsh is in general under threat. And if you think about what's threatening them, the extinction of some of these things like the dusky seaside sparrows and the increasing scarcity, it's like that Agatha Christie novel where there's 10 different suspects and they end up all of them dead. So there's so many things that tidal marshes are on the receiving end of development, and basically entire marshes being taken over by a single invasive marsh plant species like out here spartina and the East Stragmites. Sea level rise and the cutting edge of sea level rise. In many places are still harvested, grazed, burned, turned into agriculture. And I think as evolutionary biologists in this incredible phenomenal laboratory that we're engaged in, we also need to get out there in the forefront of protecting really quite scarce and fragile systems. The fact is that their subspecies makes the conservation challenging, because they're oftentimes not named easily named to be correct. And these subspecies concept is kind of slippery, because if we get into this debate about, well, they don't show enough mitochondrial and DNA differentiation, maybe they're really not good, they're kind of old-fashioned subspecies. What it really gets at is, what I would argue there, is that all of us in this room need to think about our goal in conservation. And one of my goals is not to, it's not like stamp collecting. We want to have the biggest collection of these things that we name, these taxa that are legal documents. We want to protect processes. These sparrows and other subspecies, as we have named them, represent our best ability to protect this really important process of evolutionary creating of differentiation. Incredible